Today we're looking at 10 January transfers that just make sense. Now this 10 comes from a mixture of online rumours I've seen and suggestions from you guys at home on Twitter. Thanks to everybody that got involved. There's some corkers in here. The top 3. Okay, let's start with number 10. I need something to cheer me up, don't I? Because I'm having the day from hell. This would definitely cheer me up though, because I really like this suggestion. It's Alvaro Fernandez returning. Now, I think United have got to be realistic. The left wing-back role has to be a priority in the January window. Luke Shaw, injured again. Terrell Malacia, coming back from injury, doing okay, but his body has been shut down, really, for the last 500 days. So how he responds to high-intensity play over the course of the season is a big question mark. And Diogo Dalot out there, whilst he's fine, he does a job, not having a natural left-footed wide man is a real problem. And since Erik ten Hag didn't want him, shipped him off to Benfica, he's been bloody exceptional out there. The most minutes of any outfield player in the Benfica squad. A super well-rounded profile, able to play at left back, more classically as a left wing back. Of course, when he was playing at Preston, that's where you saw the majority of his minutes. He feels like a great fit for a Ruben Amorim system. Because not only is he a tenacious defender off the ball, whenever you watched him in the Manchester United youth ranks, you could see his physicality shining through with his ball carrying. Look at some of the progressive pass numbers he's able to put up. Some of the non-penalty expected goals numbers. The contribution in the final third at Benfica has been fantastic so far since joining the club. 3 goal involvements in 9 starts. He's become a vital component to Benfica's best 11. The biggest positive, though, with this whole deal is United have a buyback clause set at around £15-16 million. United have got very little money to work with. Very little money at all to work with in this January window. Moves for the likes of Kirkes, I'm seeing. Unrealistic. Bournemouth mid-season are going to have United's pants down for Milos Kirkes. £60 million, 50, 60 million. You know, I don't have that money. Alvaro Fernandez would represent a sensible signing. He's obtainable. He's really well profiled. He's played for Manchester United in the past. He's come through the youth ranks since signing him from Real Madrid back in 2020, I think it was, so 4 or so years ago. Ten Hag didn't fancy him. Fine. But that doesn't mean Amorim won't. Next up, we've got West Ham, who have clearly got a striker problem unfolding. Obviously, we all know about Mikel Antonio's injury by now. Just such devastating news. I really do wish him a very speedy recovery. But it looks like he's going to miss, sadly, a long chunk of football. You've also got Nicholas Füllkrug, who himself has missed big chunks because of injury. He's over the age of 30. And to be honest with you, those injury problems, they're nothing new. Between 2018 and 2021, over a 3-season period, he started just 27 league games. He's had major problems with his ACL and his Achilles in the past. The Achilles seems to have reared its head yet again this season. So could West Ham look to sign someone, maybe in the short term, that also works for the long term? That's the question mark. They tried to get John Duran in the summer. They failed with that move. There is another option, I think, could be smart. And that option is Evan Ferguson. Now, the reason I think this would be smart is, first and foremost, Brighton have made him available for loan with a £60 million rating, according to Sam Wallace and Matt Law, two extremely reliable journalists in The Telegraph. If he's available on loan, there's going to be so many clubs keen. I think, first and foremost, people have forgotten, really, the level we were expecting Evan Ferguson, and still are expecting Evan Ferguson, could potentially go to. Across his first 2 Premier League campaigns, 6 goals in very limited minutes, lots of substitute appearances. Clearly at the moment, Herzer doesn't quite fancy him, prefers Danny Welbeck, prefers Rutter, prefers João Pedro. Fair enough, those are 3 exceptional players who are all more established than Evan Ferguson. But this is not disregarding him in any way. He is still one of the most high-profile talents in the Premier League, and there are going to be bucket loads of clubs after him if he is available. And why not go to West Ham? I think there's every chance he can nail down a starting berth there, play in front of 60,000 fans every week at home. I think there's a real chance for a player like Evan Ferguson to make a statement at a club like West Ham. Now, I also don't think Brighton should be looking at West Ham as a rival. You know, Brighton are battling for top 6, maybe even top 4 this season. West Ham, that's not going to happen. West Ham will be looking to stay in the Premier League this season, push at best up to 10th maybe. Evan Ferguson could help that happen. Maybe if West Ham are smart, they could get some sort of option to buy, 50, 60 million pounds on top of that. Clearly they've got a lot of cash to spend. They spent over 130 million pounds in the summer. For me, this makes sense from nearly every angle I look at it. Do I see it happening? I'm doubtful. Next up is a player who I really think needs a January move. I think it's pretty sad he hasn't got as many minutes as he should have this season. It's Carney Chukwuemeka, and I really like somebody's suggestion of Fulham as a potential destination. He's played pretty much no minutes so far under Maresca at Chelsea. Of course, last season he had those pretty significant injury problems, but this season doesn't seem like he's going to be favoured. We've seen so many different players utilised in midfield. We've seen Kieran Dewsbury-Hall get more minutes than him in there. I don't see where those minutes come from for a 20-year-old who needs minutes. But why Fulham, I hear you ask? They seem pretty stacked in the midfield, and I certainly think that's true. They've got good attacking midfield options, but there was some news this week that caught my eye. And that was Andreas Pereira, who's been an absolutely vital component to how Fulham want to play football. He's 5th on the list of chance creators in the Premier League, very high on Fulham's most used players list so far this season. He said, Olympique Marseille made an offer for me last summer. Unfortunately, it didn't work. It would be a very cool move the way De Zerbi plays soccer. Let's see in January or July if there will be a transfer. The door? Does that mean there's a hole in the midfield potentially coming for a progressive midfielder to play alongside Sasa Lukic, maybe to deputise, play alongside a player like Emile Smith-Rowe as well? There could be minutes, and I really like the idea of Carney Chukwuemeka eating them up. You think of some of the players that Fulham have had real success with in terms of signing from Big Six clubs or that have played for Big Six clubs in their past. Players like Pereira, who was at Manchester United, Emile Smith-Rowe at Arsenal, Reece Nelson at Arsenal. Iwobi was via Everton, but was at Arsenal in the past. I think this could be a smart bit of business from everybody involved. A loan with an option to buy, a loan with an obligation to buy. Let's get the Carney to Fulham train going. Next up, we're going to go to Wolves. Has a club ever needed a centre-back more in the January window? So we're going to talk about Nico Elvedi. Let's start with the centre-back issues at Wolves. It started in the summer when Max Kilman really wasn't replaced. Mascara returned from that loan move, but he picked up an ACL injury. You were expecting him to start. That left just, Craig Dawson, Totti Gomez as the only recognised centre-backs, senior centre-backs. Both have had the occasional issue. I mean, recently we've seen Lamina being deployed at centre-back. That can't continue. They've got to get a centre-back through the door. So could it be Elvedi? Well, the Athletic certainly seem to think so. Here are some of the names that they targeted in the summer that didn't join and moved on to other clubs. But one of the long-standing targets, Switzerland international Nico Elvedi, stayed with Mönchengladbach and could still re-emerge as a possibility. But key to this, his attractive summer release clause has now expired. So this might not be a cheap one to do because Mönchengladbach are not going to fancy losing Elvedi mid-season. I would be surprised to see Elvedi leave Gladbach for Wolves in January. But it would make quite a bit of sense for Wolves. Maybe for the player as well, because he would get a big old payday. And Mönchengladbach, if they can rinse them for a fee, one to keep your eye on. Next up, a bit of a rogue suggestion here, but it popped up on an article this week from The Independent. Mark Douglas, the Northern football correspondent for them, reporting that Harvey Barnes could be one of 5 players that's let go by Newcastle in order to make signings this January because, of course, they are pinched by PSR. They want to bring Antoine Semenyo to the club, and Harvey Barnes, rumoured to be one of the players who could leave. And I'm going to suggest that he would be a really good pickup for Crystal Palace. The reason being, I don't think Crystal Palace score nearly enough goals or have nearly enough goals in that forward line. Ismaila Sarr has never been a big goal scorer. Kamada, who's had to fill in, has never been a big goal scorer. And Nketiah is unproven at scoring consistent goals at Premier League level. That puts huge pressure on Iberi Eze, who has a pretty checkered injury record, and Jean-Philippe Mateta, who has only really got that one Premier League campaign of goals under his belt, to score this season yet again. And they are struggling. You look at the numbers, Mark Gahey, the second top scorer this season. That can't continue. And what has Harvey Barnes always been really good at? His XG numbers have always popped, and he's been pretty creative since he's got to Newcastle. His XG plus XA is in the top 10% of European forwards. Very impressive. Look at his non-penalty goal numbers this season, or over the last 365 days. His all-round play, even going back to Leicester, very well-rounded. 14 goal involvements, 13 goal involvements, 16 goal involvements, 14 goal involvements. Last season, when he played very limited minutes, just 800, 8 goal involvements. When he plays minutes, he contributes. So how would he fit in? Well, it's not the most natural because Sarr is operating on that right-hand side. Harvey Barnes classically wants to operate on the left. He's really good sort of coming inside, getting shots off from the edge of the area, a little bit like Iberi Eze. But he's fluid enough to work alongside Eze. I really believe that. I'm surprised he hasn't got more chance at Newcastle in terms of his minutes on the field this season and last season. Him with Eze behind Mateta or Nketiah feels like it really improves the chances of scoring goals. Now, this might have to be a smart bit of business, a PSR-related piece of business, but we've seen Newcastle operate at pretty reasonable rates. Take, for instance, the Elliot Anderson deal where he moved for, yes, £30 million, but Vlachodimos went the other way for £15 million, so it ended up being like a £15 million deal. If they could get Barnes for a similar sort of fee, which I think is unlikely, it would be a brilliant signing. At 5, we've got a rogue one. This was a suggestion on Twitter, and it is Omar Marmoush to Manchester City. But let's be real, it kind of does make an awful lot of sense. His goal scoring and creative output yet again this season has been scary. He's closing in on 30 goal involvements in all competitions so far this season. Last season, it was 18 goal involvements in about 2,300 minutes of football at 24 years of age. Really impressive in the Bundesliga. He can play in a variety of different positions. So good to watch. Excellent at set pieces. And what Man City lack this season in that forward area is really a support character for Haaland that can contribute in a big way. Julian Alvarez was that guy last season. They sold him for £90 million, whatever. Great fee for Alvarez, but they didn't replace him. And now you look at the forward line, Grealish, Doku, Savinho, Bernardo Silva, Foden have not contributed enough goals at the start of this season. Marmoush would come in and I'm almost convinced score goals straight off the bat for Man City. And that could be a huge turning point in their season because we are going to speak about in this video a Rodri replacement and everybody's speaking about a Rodri replacement. But the goal numbers are right down. The lack of support for Erling Haaland and the percentage of XG and actual goals Haaland is scoring for this team is way too high. Marmoush offers not only cover for Haaland, but he can play with Haaland. We've seen how effective he's been up there with Ugo Ekitike at the start of this season. Somebody's got to sign this guy, and the reports it could be for less than €50 million. That is pennies on the dollar to Man City. They barely spent anything in the summer. Another rumour I saw that does make an awful lot of sense is James Trafford to Tottenham Hotspur. Bear with me, Spurs fans. Don't lose your head just yet. Now, the reason for this is obviously Vicario is out for an extremely long period of time, a number of months with that fractured ankle. Fraser Forster is going to fill in, and there is question marks about whether he's the right fit for this Tottenham side. I think he's definitely going to do a job there. Very experienced professional, huge character in the dressing room, and actually can make some really smart saves. But is he good enough to play with his feet in this Ange Postecoglou system? Probably not. So would James Trafford be a good answer? He's having a really good season for Burnley in the Championship. The best defensive record in the league by an absolute mile. 5th best in the league by expected goals prevented in terms of the goalkeeper rankings. There were pretty major question marks, though, about his first season with Burnley. His post-shot expected goals numbers, pretty horrendous, ranked 33 in the league for goalkeepers, conceded about 6 more than XG said he should have. But let's not forget the pedigree and the stock James Trafford comes from. This is a Euros winner with England's under-21s, consistent player in that England setup, highly thought of at Manchester City as a ball-playing goalkeeper, and still very, very young. He's only 20. Goalkeepers don't really mature and hit the heights until their late 20s. So if Tottenham could get this deal done for a reasonable fee, I don't think Burnley are going to want to let him go at all, so it's probably going to cost a fair chunk, and let's face it, that could well be a big problem in this deal because Burnley are not going to want to lose him. But let's say, hypothetically, this was to happen. It's quite a smart bit of business. They've recruited young players recently really well. Tottenham, you likes of Archie Gray at the Championship, Lucas Bergvall. James Trafford would be an extension of that. He might not start ahead of Vicario when he's fit, but maybe he pushes him. Vicario has himself some suspect moments, particularly from corners. And if he is going to be injured for the next few months, maybe Trafford provides competition for him and Fraser Forster becomes the third goalkeeper. I know Tottenham fans will be losing their heads at me, but I think there are certain factors here that kind of makes sense. Next up, we return to the Etihad with a potential replacement for Rodri. Bear with me. It's Martin Zubimendi. Now, of course, we all know he's turned down Arsenal in the past, Barcelona in the past, Real Madrid in the past. Why would he leave in January? Well, let's take a little bit of a deep dive into this, because in The Athletic this week, David Ornstein, the Oracle, said here, multiple well-placed sources believe Zubimendi is coming to terms with the idea of leaving Sociedad and anticipate that happening next summer. But he goes on to say, there have been suggestions Manchester City could go for him in January to help cover the loss of Rodri. Now, obviously it feels unlikely a January move is going to occur, but it doesn't feel impossible. We've also seen this news over the last month, which twigs a few things in my mind. Real Sociedad's director of football, of course, the legend that is Roberto Alabe, is leaving at the end of the season. Does that maybe change something in Zubimendi's mind? Maybe he's obtainable for a club like Manchester City, the chance to work with a Spanish head coach in Pep Guardiola, the greatest manager of modern times. It's got to be tempting, especially when you consider that La Real, pretty middling this season, not ripping up any trees. Zubimendi, not particularly ripping up any trees. Rodri out with a long-term injury means that they're definitely missing legs, duel-winning, ball-playing ability in there. And what does Zubimendi bring you? Big pass contribution numbers, progressive passes, and just in terms of volume, he's a beast. Remember back to the Euros when he actually replaced Rodri at half-time in the final. It was like for like, almost, in terms of profile. Now, I'm most interested by the fact that they could potentially play alongside each other when Rodri comes back. Two metronomes in midfield. You wouldn't get the ball off them for 90 minutes. I think it's unlikely, but in terms of transfers that make sense, I mean, this is it. We're going to have some fun with number 2, because this is a suggestion that was sent in on Twitter. It's rogue. It is rogue. But I kind of think it does make sense. Arda Guler to Arsenal. Now, of course, initially, this is unlikely to be a permanent move. But let's cast our mind back to Martin Ødegaard, shall we? Who, of course, joined Arsenal under fairly similar circumstances. Not identical to Arda, but wasn't getting enough minutes. He put up about 300 minutes across the course of the season. Arda Guler, about 300 minutes across the course of this season. He joined Arsenal on loan. That move worked out so well that they ended up coughing up a fee and buying Martin Ødegaard on a permanent. What a move it's proved to be. Arda Guler not getting enough minutes in this Real Madrid side. To be honest with you, it's a struggle to see where they come. With the forward line as it is, I just cannot see how Arda Guler breaks down the door. At Arsenal, you could raise the same thing. You could say, well, he wants to play potentially on the right or in the 10 space, or in Ødegaard, Bukayo Saka. But we've seen injuries to Ødegaard. No real cover there. Nwaneri looks dangerous, but very young, like Guler. Saka, not a natural right-wing cover there. So could Guler come in, have an impact in one of those roles? He's extremely versatile. His numbers have always popped, even since he was a young kid. Still very young now. Could he come in on loan, do some damage, and then that transfer becomes permanent? I think it's unlikely. Look, it is unlikely. But in terms of fun moves, this is it. Okay, number 1 was by far and away the most suggested makes sense transfer in January, even though it wouldn't really be in January. It would be a pre-contract in January to then join on a free next summer. But the transfer, I suppose, would happen technically. It's Trent Alexander-Arnold to Real Madrid. Okay, we all know by now that he's out of contract in the summer and hasn't yet supposedly been offered a new deal, although I'm sure negotiations are ongoing. That money he must want is probably super high, and rightly so, man. He's the best right back in world football. He is the definition of a Galactico right back, and Real Madrid need a right back. Dani Carvajal's minutes over the last few seasons, not great. He hasn't put up over 2,000 league minutes once in 5 campaigns. He's just done his ACL. He's 32 years old. Lucas Vazquez has already played 11 times at right back this season. Clearly, they are amping up for a right back arrival. Is it not obviously going to be Trent? He won't arrive in January, but that deal could happen in January because he can sign a pre-contract arrangement with a foreign side. This feels too obvious, too sensible. We don't need to go into it in massive detail. But I want to know your one transfer that just makes sense in the January transfer window. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. I'll see you later. Goodbye.